I've talked to some of you about my preference for um, using everyday search engines to do academic research, and I have said that I thought I could teach you in about 10 minutes, so I'm going to try and do that now. So I'm going to go pretty quickly. You can pause and review anything that you might want to take a closer look at, and follow up. Feel free to follow up with me if you have any questions or you want help trying any of these strategies. So I should start off by saying that Alan November is the source of is the guy who taught me a lot of these things. He has a website that's called November Learning, and um, he's written a book, which I loved, called Web Literacy for Educators. But on his site, you can get a lot of the content from the book for free. And he just has a range of articles and web literacy quizzes and things there. But we're going to use some of Alan November's favorite strategies. Basically, they're search operators um, in the service of trying to find some academic sources. So I'm going to use Google and Google operators, but you can do a search for Google operators, Yahoo search operators, like lots of different search engines have these things. And as I look for academic sources, I'm going to come back to this idea of trying to find the expert synthesis. Uh, Later on, I'll give you some tips about how to refine your initial search using the initial results to focus search terms. And we'll spend a little bit of time looking at Google Scholar, and I can come back to advanced search. Now, a note on background reading. I always like to say to my students that Wikipedia is not a dirty word, but it shouldn't be in your list of references. It's a great encyclopedia, but we use background reading to learn the vocabulary that will help us make good um, search, more focused searches. So quickly, I'm going to show you a little demo of my favorite search operators. And what happens is these are things that you'll see. I'll just type into my Google search. I'll add the term file type :PDF. There are no spaces in there. And I'll add cite.edu, which is U.S. universities. Some other countries use that, I think, too. .gov is U.S. government reports. .ac.uk is UK universities. So we're going to try it out, and I'm going to show you how this works. So I just picked a sample topic of I'm interested in how does teaching of grammar impact writing, students' writing performance. And so I typed into just a regular old Google search, writing, grammar, and teaching, and you see that I came up with 82 million results. And there's here's an Atlantic article, The Wrong Way to Teach Grammar. Some of these things might be appropriate background reading, but I don't know that I'm getting to academic sources. So before I start clicking on things, I like to run multiple searches. I don't like to get bogged down in one source until I've run a few searches and tried to refine. So notice I had 82 million. Now I'm going to try one of these operators, and I'm just going to add the term cite:.edu. Now I'm down to 500,000 results, and I'm starting to see more things that are a little bit more focused on specific teaching strategies. Now I'm going to try just swap out cite.gov, government reports, and I see some things there. Now I'm going to add in I'm seeing that some of my searches have, some of my results have this notation PDF. And when I'm looking for research articles, I always want to make sure I have access to the full text. So I'm actually going to go ahead and add the search term file type :PDF. So here I'm now back to writing, grammar, teaching, cite.edu, file type PDF. Now I notice that I still have 381,000 results, and I'm also not seeing necessarily the types of summary things that I'd like to see, more like this evidence-based practices for writing instruction. And so I'm going to add a term that I like to use to get at summary research. And I use the term meta to be shorthand for meta-analysis. And so now I'm down to 100, and I cut my results by over 2/3 down to 103,000 results. And I found three things here that I'm actually interested in kind of taking a closer look at. So here's a meta-analysis of writing instruction for adolescent students, evidence supporting best practices, um, writing now, something from the National Council of Teachers of English. Um, Basically, they're talking about summarizing research, and it specifically is mentioning grammar here in the description. So I'm going to go ahead and open up those three sources. So here's evidence supporting best practices. Now, when I skim through this source, I notice they're summarizing a lot of different issues, um, and they're including some citations, so I can kind of follow up on some of their research here. So when you see that they're using a citation there, but then when I'm scrolling down to the end of this document, I don't see, there's no list of references, and so it's a little less useful, but might be some good background reading, but I'm not sure actually what type of document this is. And then I come over here, this is something a little more of a traditional research article. It's published in the Journal of Educational Psychology, meta-analysis of writing instruction. I like to read the abstract at the beginning because it basically summarizes everything that's going to be said in the paper. You see that they're calculating average effect size for all of these different interventions, strategy, instruction, sentence combining, process writing approach, and then grammar instruction down here at the end. Here's the third document that I looked at. This was the Writing Now. This was a policy brief provided by the National Council of Teachers of English. And again, this is a very high level summary, summarizes a lot of key terms that I'm going to come across in the research. And the thing I like about this short document is it gives me an overview, links to some other resources if I want to read more, and actually has some pretty good references in the notes. And as I was looking through the notes, I noticed that Harris came up again, or sorry, Steve Graham came up again, and Steve Graham was actually one of the authors here. And so when I did a little bit more looking for than Steve Graham, I found another report that he was part of on writing ineffective strategies for adolescents. So let's come back and kind of synthesize what I've been doing, summarize a little bit what I've been doing here. And so what I was basically, by searching in, limiting my search to full PDFs published on university websites or in government sites, then I was able to quickly get to lots of academic sources, and you saw that I was able to go right to the full PDF and free, and I'm not logging into any library database. Now, for most of you, that might be all you need to see, and you can go and experiment with your own search terms, and you'll probably find a lot of things there. And we're 8.5 minutes in, so you got a good little mini lesson. If I were going to go into more depth on expert synthesis, I'm going to start to explain what filters I'm using as I'm looking for the specific text that I'm going to dig deep into. And when I talk about expert synthesis, what I mean is I'm sampling from the top of the academic food chain. I'm trying to find people who are experts in this field, and I try and quickly get a sense of what their article is all about. So I read the abstract and conclusion really quickly. I skim the references, the intro, and discussion. Notice that the discussion is oftentimes different than the conclusion in a research article. And I love to mine the bibliography, looking what did the experts read. And so let me talk kind of about why I'm doing that. When I talk about climbing the food chain of expertise in online research, anytime I'm looking at a text, I want to consider the professionalism, specialization, and breadth and depth of expertise. So I want somebody who's been studying about this and publishing about this topic for years. I don't want somebody who just occasionally writes an article on this. And so everyday media, like a journalist, like that Atlantic article we came across earlier, that would be written by a journalist who studied that topic for, maybe a week, and they interviewed some researchers and wrote the article. Okay, that's fine. We can also find a lot of small-scale university research where maybe a graduate student or professors with varying levels of expertise would publish a peer-reviewed article. Sometimes this is a very isolated study talking about the effects on 10 students or 2 teachers or something like that, but it's hard to generalize from these small scale studies. Then we have influential publications, and these are the things that the experts are reading, and specialists in the field almost always cite this. Okay, this in more recent times, Carol Dweck's research on mindset has been really influential. And so it might be good to go, even though it might be just a single initial study that then she's elaborated on, you might want to go and see what did she do to get those findings on mindset. And then at the top of my food chain or my food pyramid, to mix metaphors here, I talk about expert synthesis. So this is where you see terms like meta-analysis, literature review, review of literature. Sometimes you'll find an article that is just a literature review or a meta-analysis. Other times they reference these in the introduction to articles. And almost every research study has a little mini literature review at the beginning in the introduction to say what they learned before they started their study. So that's what I'm trying to do when I'm looking for expert synthesis. And so as you saw me use, I used the term meta at one point to refine my search. And that's short for meta-analysis, but meta-analysis is spelled differently. Sometimes you'll see it without the hyphen. Sometimes you'll see they're talking about multiple meta-analyses, and they'll put ES instead of IS at the end. So oftentimes I'll just throw in the term meta, and that's enough. If I use review of literature or literature review, I put those in quotes so they come up together. Okay, now I'm going to transition to looking at some particular features of Google Scholar. Everything we've done up to this point was just using the regular Google search engine, just typing right even into just my Chrome browser bar, address bar. Okay, and as I take you into looking at Google Scholar, I want to call attention to their tagline, which is "Stand on the Shoulders of Giants." And one of the key things that some of Google Scholar's features helps you to do is to identify the really influential people in a field. And this is Jo Boaler, and she's someone who's been very influential in terms of thinking about math instruction and how some of Carol Dweck's mindset research applies in mathematics classrooms. And as in part 2 of this series, I'm going to focus you on, I'm going to go a little bit deeper into Google Scholar and talk about what you see there and help you to figure out who are the Jo Boalers in your field of interest. So how can you use some of Google Scholar's features here in terms of like author bios and how many times they've been cited to identify the really influential people. And we'll do that in part 2.